Welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Something huge just happened in Asia's defense world, and almost nobody's talking about it. This agreement goes beyond buying weapons. It's about co-building, technology sharing, and creating a new defense axis in Asia. So what's really behind this move, and how could it shift Asia's military balance? Let's break down what this deal means for Malaysia, South Korea, and the world. Subscribe for more deep dives into global power shifts.
Absolutely. Our mission today really is to analyze the geopolitical significance, yes, but also the sheer industrial depth of this memorandum of understanding, the MoU, signed by Malaysia and South Korea back on October 27, 2025. And you're spot on. This isn't just, a simple transaction for buying equipment. It's really a foundational strategic shift, a paradigm shift aiming for, industrial symmetry and greater defense autonomy between these two key Asian middle powers.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When we normally talk about defense deals, the default assumption is always transactional, right? Cash for gear. You're calling this a paradigm shift. So what makes this particular MoU fundamentally different from, say, Malaysia buying F-18s from the US years ago?
Well, it really comes down to the framework itself. This is a comprehensive government-to-government agreement, a G2G deal. Standard contracts, they're almost purely about acquisition. Buy this, get that. This MoU, however, explicitly outlines commitments for joint research and development, co-production of defense assets within Malaysia.
Within Malaysia, okay.
Yes, and perhaps the most, let's say, revolutionary element, co-marketing the resulting systems to third countries.
Right, co-marketing. That's often where the skepticism creeps in, isn't it? It sounds ambitious on paper. But realistically, hasn't South Korea or really any major technology exporter historically been quite guarded about sharing the highest value intellectual property, the IP? How does this MoU actually legally guarantee Malaysia gets that crucial know-how and, importantly, a slice of the revenue from global sales?
That is the absolute pivotal question. Look, if this were just a statement of intent, you could maybe dismiss it. But the inclusion of joint R&D and co-marketing fundamentally changes the whole commercial incentive structure. It has to. By agreeing to co-market, they're essentially agreeing upfront to share R&D revenues, manufacturing capacity, and, crucially, future export profits. And maybe even more strategically, this structure allows them, at least in theory, to bypass or perhaps soften some of those restrictive export control regimes often imposed by traditional Western partners.
The ones that limit third-party sales of jointly developed systems.
Exactly. So by building it together, they gain much more control over the destiny of the product, including who they can potentially sell it to later on.
Okay, so for Malaysia, this means moving beyond being just a customer.
Precisely. It shifts them from being a mere buyer, perpetually dependent on foreign suppliers for spare parts, for technology upgrades, to becoming a strategic industrial implementer, a manufacturing partner with a real stake in the international export market.
That leads perfectly into the why now question. Why are these two nations making such a deep kind of long-term commitment right at this moment, especially with intensifying superpower competition seemingly demanding everyone pick a side?
Well, it's really a pragmatic response to, frankly, vulnerability. Global defense supply chains are proving quite volatile, and the intensifying competition between, say, the U.S. and China means that relying too heavily on any single external source, whether it's Western powers or Russia, carries significant political risk, and often high costs, too. I think both Seoul and Kuala Lumpur recognize that true defense independence, and especially cost-effectiveness looking ahead, requires collaborative innovation among these middle powers. So this MoU is a very deliberate effort by Malaysia to diversify its supply sources, partnering with a technologically advanced regional neighbor.
But doesn't that strategy carry a trade-off? If you diversify away from traditional, say, NATO-aligned suppliers, is there a risk Malaysia loses some of the interoperability advantages they might have had with other allied forces?
That's a perfectly valid concern, and it represents a strategic choice they're actively making. The benefit they seem to be prioritizing the autonomy. The IP control is clearly deemed more valuable in the long run than maintaining strict interoperability with maybe older legacy systems. Plus, it's worth noting, South Korean systems, while often uniquely developed, are frequently designed with modularity in mind. This could make future integration into mixed fleet environments potentially easier than, say, relying solely on older Russian tech or completely proprietary Chinese systems.
Okay, let's get into the hardware then. This is where it gets really interesting for many listeners. What specific defense sectors are being targeted for this co-production and technology transfer? We know Malaysia bought 18 F-A-50 light fighters from Korea back in 2023. How does this MoU build on that?
Right, that initial FA-50 acquisition, valued at around $920 million US, was really the foundation, the appetizer, if you will. This G2G agreement fundamentally shifts that relationship. It's no longer just vendor-client. It's about becoming collaborative developers. It's leveraging that existing platform expertise, the FA-50 experience, to position Malaysian industry for, well, potentially much more complex involvement down the line. Specifically, this could mean participating in manufacturing subsystems, maybe specialized components, for South Korea's ambitious next-generation fighter jet program, the KF-21 Boram.
Ah, the Borami.
Exactly. Even contributing components provides Malaysian firms with invaluable exposure to very high-level aerospace engineering standards and practices.
Okay, moving from the air down to the sea. Maritime security is obviously paramount, particularly for Malaysia, sitting astride the Straits of Malacca. What kind of joint warship construction are we looking at?
Maritime security is absolutely critical for both nations, you're right. The MoU outlines joint opportunities for constructing things like maritime patrol vessels, essential for routine monitoring, and also more heavily armed corvettes. But what's also quite fascinating is the push towards developing new technological modular vessels.
Modular. What's the key difference there? Why is modularity important?
Well, a standard corvette is typically built for one primary role, maybe anti-surface warfare. A modular vessel design, on the other hand, allows the Navy to rapidly swap out mission modules. So you can change from, say, mine countermeasures configuration to special operations support, or switch to anti-submarine warfare, all without needing an entirely new ship hull.
That sounds incredibly flexible.
It offers extreme flexibility and potentially significant cost savings over the life of the platform. And for Malaysia, needing to project sovereignty and deter incursions across its really vast maritime zone, including sensitive areas like the South China Sea, that flexibility is crucial.
Makes sense. And the third leg of the stool, missile systems.
Yes. Missile capabilities are the third key pillar here. The agreement aims to give Malaysia access to high-precision missile systems. This is vital for modernizing its air defense capabilities, significantly enhancing its anti-ship potential, and possibly even providing longer-range strike options down the road. The goal here seems less about just, licensed producing old technology and more about potentially co-developing new networked missile systems. That gives Malaysia a much-needed boost in modern deterrence.
Now, before we pivot fully to the geopolitical fallout, there was one very specific, quite technical move made just before this MoU was signed. I think it really underscores the industrial seriousness of this whole deal. Can you elaborate on the significance of those military air qualification certificates?
Absolutely. This is often the overlooked detail, the bureaucratic footnote, but it actually tells a huge part of the story. They signed a joint recognition agreement specifically on military air qualification certificates. Now, for anyone outside the defense world, that probably sounds incredibly dry.
Yeah, a bit niche, perhaps.
Right, but it's huge. Certifying a military aircraft or even a major component for airworthiness is typically a multi-year, incredibly rigorous, and often, frankly, protectionist bureaucratic process. It's designed to guard national defense industries.
Sounds like a deliberately slow gatekeeping process.
But it often is. So the immediate mutual recognition of each other's certification standards is almost unprecedented, certainly in this context. This is actually the first such agreement South Korea has signed with any Asian country. What it does is remove a massive technical and bureaucratic hurdle that would otherwise delay or complicate future joint production of aircraft and air-launched weapons systems. It signals an extremely high level of trust and, more importantly, an immediate commitment to integrated industrial standards. This is the kind of mechanism that truly allows Malaysia to graduate from just being a buyer to becoming a genuine industry implementer.
Okay, so we've established the unprecedented industrial depth here. Now let's zoom out. Look at the map. What does this new defense axis, this partnership, actually mean for the balance of power in the wider Asia-Pacific region?
The geostrategic impact is potentially substantial. Look, both Malaysia and South Korea identify as intermediate powers. They're militarily capable, economically influential, but they're not strictly tied into the security architecture of one major superpower over the other. They hedge. By forming this production technology axis, they're effectively strengthening regional security resilience, building strategic depth. It's a form of collective security self-reliance, you could say.
So amidst all the regional tensions, the South China Sea disputes, Taiwan Strait worries, North Korea, this cooperation could actually act as a kind of stabilizing element.
I think that's the intention, yes.
Yeah.
It creates a sort of new center of gravity in the region's security landscape. Instead of regional security being entirely dependent on the whims or commitments of external great powers, this agreement helps distribute security risks and perhaps more importantly, technological capabilities, more evenly among capable middle powers. And for South Korea, let's be clear, extending its influence and defense partnerships into Southeast Asia is vital. It directly supports their stated national ambition of becoming the world's fourth largest arms exporter by 2030.
Right, the export goal.
And deals based on co-production and technology transfer. Those are the fastest, most effective ways to achieve that kind of deep global market penetration and build long-term relationships.
And Malaysia's location, right on the Straits of Malacca, that's absolutely central to South Korea's regional strategy, isn't it?
Oh, it's paramount. The Straits of Malacca isn't just a waterway. It's a critical global choke point for trade, especially energy security. It directly impacts the supply lines for major Northeast Asian economies like South Korea. Partnering closely with Malaysia on defense production and enhancing maritime security in that specific area. That ensures stability and allows Seoul to project influence and logistical planning capabilities into a region absolutely critical to its economic future.
And thinking about the broader ASEAN community, this kind of bilateral deal, it must offer a pretty powerful model, right? Especially regarding diversification.
Yes, absolutely. For other ASEAN members, this provides a tangible example that they are no longer solely dependent on, say, the US, Europe, or Russia for high-end defense technology. It shows a path towards building a more diverse network of defense partners within the region itself, which ultimately enhances overall regional defense autonomy. Malaysia's core objective throughout this entire process, you can see it quite clearly, has been to build a sustainable, sovereign defense industrial base. They want to ensure that their key military operations are never held hostage by the political interests or export restrictions of distant suppliers. This agreement directly supports that goal.
So the cooperation really is fostering a new kind of defense network in Asia, one emphasizing autonomy and self-reliance among these important middle powers. But okay, while the MoU looks powerful on paper, what are the most immediate practical hurdles? What needs to happen to ensure this isn't just symbolic?
Right, the translation from a signed memorandum to actual humming production lines, that's always the ultimate test, isn't it? First, they have to quickly establish efficient, genuinely joint production lines. That requires significant coordination. Then, they absolutely must clarify the complex intricacies of intellectual property rights. Sharing high-tech designs across borders is notoriously difficult legally and commercially.
IP is always tricky.
Always. Furthermore, they need to establish very precise investment assignments. This particularly means ensuring South Korean investment flows into Malaysian small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs, to meet Malaysia's local industrial participation, or LAP, requirements. If those complex mechanisms stall or get bogged down in bureaucracy, then yes, the cooperation risks remaining more aspirational than truly industrial.
Looking further ahead then, beyond the current focus on jets and ships, where could this technology axis potentially lead them? What's on the horizon?
Well, the immediate MU is focused on leveraging existing platforms, building that foundational trust and industrial capacity. But the future roadmap seems clearly pointed towards more advanced, cutting-edge technology areas. We can probably expect progressive collaboration on new domains like unmanned systems, think advanced drones, autonomous underwater vehicles, also areas like cyber warfare capabilities, applying AI in combat control systems, and developing next-generation electronic warfare suites. These are all areas necessary to maintain a competitive edge globally.
Okay, so the final takeaway here seems to be that if this Malaysia-South Korea collaboration really succeeds, it could significantly reduce the region's historical dependence on external powers, whether Western or Russian. It could fundamentally reshape the Indo-Pacific defense procurement landscape.
It absolutely has that potential, yes. This agreement elevates the Malaysia-South Korea relationship far beyond a typical buyer-seller dynamic. It becomes a true strategic partnership, founded on shared technology, production autonomy, and potentially joint export capabilities. And perhaps the provocative thought to leave you, the listener, with is this. Will this innovative model, based on genuine technology sharing and production autonomy, trigger similar defense technology pacts among other significant middle powers in Asia? Could we see nations like Indonesia, perhaps Vietnam, maybe even Australia, looking at similar arrangements, thereby further decentralizing the global defense supply chain and accelerating military autonomy right across the region?
Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for watching or listening. We invite you to explore other deep dives into global power shifts and emerging technologies. If you found this discussion valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to the Geostrategic podcast for more in-depth analysis on topics that shape our world. Stay informed, stay ahead, and stay tuned for the next episode.